continuing work on our project Barracuda here in the garage, and last time you saw the video where we introduced you to some of those basic hand tools you're going to need to start making patch panels. We were making one so we can get the cowl rust taken care of. Well, we're going to move on with that a little bit more, show you a few more things we've done to that patch panel, and a trick I tried that we were trying to make a radiused flange for underneath one of the hats over there. We'll show you how that worked out, so let's kick it off. Okay, we're back at it here. Now, one of the things I'm going to show you here is we had already tack welded this piece in over here, and I've taken the hat off and orient it here. It's going to go here like this, and what we want to do is try and get that gap up a little bit. So I'm going to use a hammer and a dolly. It's a general use body dolly. Here's the ball peen hammer, and since I have access the windshield out, it's easy to get my arm in here, and we're just going to try and tap this up. We use the dolly to kind of hold this down over here because we really can't clamp too well here because you got the bracket for the parking brake underneath here, so there's not really anything you can grab onto this way. I got it clamped down pretty tight right in the front lip. So we're going to use this to hold us down, and we're going to use a dolly off method and just move the metal. We don't want to hammer on the dolly. What that's going to do is it's going to flatten out the metal, stretch it out. We don't want to do that. We want to shape it. So we use a dolly off method. If you don't believe me, check on YouTube. There's hundreds and hundreds of videos on how to use a hammer and dolly to shape and move metal around. So I followed a few. I'm going to show you what I learned. I'm just using my hand to hold the dolly in place, and the hammer is doing most of the work over here. Switch over here. Back here. Take a look where we're at. Yeah, it's a lot better. It's just a little flatter over here. Now, what I can do is I'm going to have to trim off the inside a little bit here. I got a flat piece here, and I can pinch weld that down, or actually use the vice grips and clamp that down, tap this over, maybe put another piece of metal right in here, finish that off. Okay, gone ahead and done a little more pounding up here. Let's see what else we did. Marked a line right across here, and that's where the underside of the bracket for the parking brake goes, and we ended up putting this in the vise on this edge, kind of bending this over a little bit. Using the hammer and dolly, we lowered this quite a bit, raised this up some, and we also took this one weld we had done when we first tacked this on, kind of to bridge that gap, cut that weld, and from the inside peened up this piece to this piece, so it's almost covered this gap around here quite a bit. Now we have to tack weld around here a little bit more. Same thing with this little spot here and on this corner right there. And then obviously when we're all done, seam sealer is going to rule the world under here. Here's the hat. I was able to take this off, grind it up. Now it's not perfect. It's at least allowing us to mock it up, but I'm going to use this one. There are pinholes all the way around here. Now these can be cleaned up by using a metal prep to remove the rust from the pits, clean this all up really nice. Then you can do an epoxy prime on this and maybe fill in these holes with seam sealer, fiberglass, resin, something. If this is not terrible. It's not great, but it's what we got. We'll make it work. Remember, these cars are never going to be a concours restoration, and the only person who's going to know is you. And the goal here really isn't to be 100% exactly factory. It's to stop the water from getting in the carpet. So as long as the holes are sealed up and it's not going to rust anymore, you've taken care of that, then you're fine. Now, in one of the other videos, you may have seen this in the background right here. There's a reason for that. This is level across here, front and back. So when we're making the metal, we're putting this back in place, one of the things we want to be aware of is this is level, left to right, and front to back. Because if it's not, when you go to put your fresh air box underneath and you clamp it down, it's going to sit all funky. You don't want that. So keep this in mind. Take a few measurements. Of course, make sure your car is level on the ground too, but at least get an eyeball of where it's at before you start tearing it apart so you know how it's going to go back together when you're done. We're all set up to do some tack welds here, and I got the settings down a little bit. I don't want to blow through any metal. I keep the wire feed speed down a little bit. So we're going to do a little tacking here. Let's see if we can't move on from there. Remember, double check your settings before you put those tacks on, because you want to make sure you're good. Otherwise you're cutting welds, starting over. So far so good. Let me get one over here. Okay, good. We have 4 good tack welds. Good left to right. Front to back, a little high in the back, which is fine. It just means I need a little more working over here. And tweaking now, before you start doing all your stitch welds around, is key. Okay, liking it. All right. Now you see I've got probably every single clamp in my arsenal here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pairs of vice strips. I got another one right here in case I need it. Can't tell you enough. You can't have enough clamps when doing welding work like this. I've pressed other ones into service I've never used, like this old pair of Craftsman ones. It doesn't have the return spring. It doesn't matter. So long as they can clamp down, hang on to it. Scrounge them up. Pick them up at garage sales, tool auctions, wherever. You can't have enough clamps. Trust me. All right, we're going to do a little more hammering on here. I want to try and bring this piece up to the hat before we do any more tack welding around. But we're looking good over here. Okay, we've done a little more shaping, gotten this leveled off front and back, left to right. It's got to go down a little bit in the back. Not terrible though. It's sitting pretty good. Now, I'm going to finish doing some stitch welding around here a little bit, trying to fill in some of these gaps. Same thing down here. There's a little gap right there. There's a gap underneath here. Now, what I'm going to do with those is, when I'm done doing a little stitch welding, I can take this off, flip it upside down, put it on my little welding table over there, and I'll use some of these little pieces that I've cut off when I make my cuts, because these come in handy. They're not just scraps. One of these might be just a perfect fit underneath or even on top to fill in some of these gaps I need to make the holes go away. Alright, we've done a pretty good job of getting some welds going on around here, and one of the reasons for doing this like I'm doing it is just for my own sake. I'm sharing with you what I'm doing, how I fabricate some things out of scrap metal, but it's also giving me some time to practice on getting my welder settings correct for welding sheet metal, and then getting my technique down. So when I go to do some more sections, I'll be better at it. So if you have some scrap metal at home, go ahead and practice. Every time I pull the trigger on that MIG gun, I get a little bit better. And the goal is to get nice little, beads, one at a time. Hit it, let it set, hit it, let it set. You don't want to try and pull a bead. You'll blow through, you get it too hot in one spot. And we're not too worried about it here. You're not going to see this. But if you're doing, welding on body panels on the outside, too much heat, too long, you're going to warp the panel. Then you got to do a lot more body work. So if you do a little shot and space it a little shot, space it a little shot, for your tacks, you're good. Then if you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, really close together, then move over here, you'll be good too. So now another trick I learned is that when you have holes like this in other spots, you're going to get blow through, especially when you're working with metal that's sort of solids and has been rusty. Take a piece of copper and clamp it in place, hold it behind there. So what will happen is you'll get your MIG metal hot and the surrounding metal hot, but since there's such a gap there, that hot molten metal just wants to fall through. This will support it, this copper plate, while it cools. When it's cool, this comes right off. Let me show you. I'm going to tack it in and do a little thing on the side here, and I'll show you what it looks like when we're done. Move the camera angle up so I can show you where I put that. We got this gap right here, from that finger over to where I got the clamp. And I don't know if you can see it through there, but I put that piece of copper sheet in there. So I'm going to tack weld that little seam there, try and get it closed up, and that piece of copper is going to keep that molten metal from falling in. Got that gap closed up. I'm going to pull the clamp off. And reach underneath here. This is going to come right out. Ta-da! Now it did blow a couple holes through there, but for the most part, it helped keep that metal from falling through. Okay, done a bit more welding along the edges here. Going ahead and ground the welds down a little bit, and we are pretty. Let's hold this down here. This is solid. This is, I could have reached in here with just the gloves on before we cut this out and pretty much ripped this out with my bare hands. That's how much rust was all the way around here. Now, man, pretty good to go. So there's a few more spots here. I got a hole here, got some bigger holes here. We'll patch in, maybe from the back side, just so we don't have any blow through with some of those little scraps I showed you earlier. But for the most part, this is solid. What we're going to do is we'll come through here with some paintable body sealer all the way around these edges here and get them so they're waterproof. Remember, that's the goal here, waterproof. We'll do the same thing with the little pinholes inside here. And let me show you what we got here so far. Take this off. The multiple clamps. Here's what the backside looks like. Now I've gone ahead and, when I had it attached, peened this over to this piece. And the flat piece, where are we at here? Over here. Peen this over the hat too. That's how the factory did it. This actual flat piece curved up to the inside of the hat, and then they tack welded this down to it. So we can do a little tack welding on the inside here if you feel like you need to. I may not. I may do a little hammering down here because we want to have our gasket sit nice up in this area for our air box. And I'll do some test fits too to make sure we got just enough room all the way around that's going to fit properly. You know, especially before we go any further on this piece here. So far, this one little section of patch panel is coming along. Just for the sake of test fitting, I actually put my air vent back in place. It seals up pretty good. Fit right in. This is a scene you never usually get to see, right? But fits in there pretty good. Nice and solid. I mean, it needs to be finished, of course, and that's why it's a little wobbly up there. But I'm pretty happy with the fit, the look. Hangs straight. We can continue. Now, I told you about these little panel alignment clamps, right? You can buy them from a couple of different places, and since I had the square stuff, I went ahead and made my own. You can see how they're kept in. There's a little piece of metal, kind of slides right through the slot there, keeps the two gaps aligned pretty well. It's held in by a pin that you just tighten up, and you don't need to crank it down because all you're doing is getting these panels close. So I made two of them, so I can take a look at the next piece back here. Now, this is part of the old section we cut out. There's a section right along this edge here where I'll probably cut this rust off the bottom, reuse the top section, and then get a piece of metal kind of come right in around here. This might not be so bad. We could probably put the new piece right down on top of the hat, or to the edge of the hat, however we want to do it, and come around, finish up in this corner. And we'll save this piece here, and weld it back on. We'll have to see how it goes, because we do have some, you can probably see it right up in here. There's a hole there, there's a hole there, there's a hole there, there's a hole there. You can see that silver dynamite right through it. So we don't know what we're going to do here yet. We got a lot of options. We can cut a triangular piece right here. Comes all the way down. Right through here. Then cut another triangular piece over here. And then cut another one comes around. We'll see how it goes. Okay. First thing we want to do is, before we make our flange, take a piece of metal and we want to bend it. Alright? Now you can use your vise for this if you have a pair of the flanging pliers I mentioned earlier with the wide bills on them. You could do it with those and hand tools. But I made myself a sheet metal brake just for making angles. And again, I had scrap metal laying around, made my own. So mark it, lift it up, pretty simple, make yourself an angle. Now you're asking, how are we going to make that curve? Hold on. Now we're going to make it bend. You're thinking, yeah, right. Okay, well, here's how we're going to do that. We're going to make some dimples all along here with a pair of special vice grips I just made. And did I just invent this? No. I found this on a message board. Took a couple pieces of shoulder bolt, 3/8, cut it, welded two to the bottom, one to the top. And we're going to use it to dimple the metal, and it'll slowly start to bend around. Now, you can do this with one of those fancy shrinkers and stretching tools that you can buy, where it pinches the metal closer together and then it starts to curve around. But we don't have the money for that, so we made a tool that does the same thing. It's going to take a little more working than using one of those shrinker and stretcher tools, but this is a way to do it on the cheap. So we're just going to start by right about here. See how it start to go? Oh, there we go again. And again. So we're starting to get our curve on there now, right? Back and hit it a little bit more. Pretty slick, right? Okay, here we are back at the car. You can see how the angle is not bad to fit where we got it to go. So that's pretty good. But now, we really don't have a flat flange. So what's to do? Well, now it's time for a little heat. Hang on. Okay, what we're going to do next is we're going to heat this up. And I have myself a oxygen map gas setup, little tiny bottles you can get at the hardware store. And if you have an oxyacetylene torch or even a propane torch, you might get it hot enough to get it to do what you need it to do. So we're going to use a torch, and then we're going to use different dolly, different hammer. We're just going to flatten that out. So let's see how we do here, shall we? Okay, got our torch going. Stick on here, start heating this up. And with this stuff, shouldn't take long. Now you are working on sheet metal, so you don't want to get these tips too close to the edges, because you will kind of burn them right off. Want to get a nice even color out of it. Nice and red. Nice and hot. While we're hot, we're going to try to do it this way here. Hit the first one. And just the first one. Okay, well, what's supposed to happen is when you heat this up, after you make your dimples, you're supposed to be able to heat it up and hit it with your hammer, shrink that down, and keep your radius. Well, since I have no skill at doing this, and I'm just trying to learn a new one myself to learn how to make a radius like this, it didn't work out for me. I couldn't keep that radius without it flattening this thing out. Even heating it up just one at a time and trying to hammer one down, not a lot of luck. So what did I end up doing? Well, got out the cutters, and on each high dimple, I just cut each one, and I was able to take the pliers and just kind of keep bending it so each one of these folds underneath each other. Now I'm going to try and heat it up a little bit so it's overlapping at this point, and then I can flatten it out and keep some of that radius. Actually, I decided to skip the heat and try it cold first, and with it kind of overlapping, it's not doing too bad. Not too bad. I mean, there's a little overlap there. And of course, this isn't watertight. This is not one single piece of metal, which is what we were hoping for. But again, we're going to be using a lot of seam sealer. And we can actually go in here and put some welds on these, fill them in. Not a big deal. Well, we have a radius. Not the perfect one we wanted, but we didn't use a lot of expensive tools. We did it with what we had. Now we got a piece we can use. Okay, here's our hat kind of held back in place. Getting close here. You can see we went through, and after a little more welding and a little more grinding, we got it looking pretty good. Now there's a few gaps, little spots in here you can see, up in here as well. But remember, this is all going to get covered with seam sealer before we get a quick coat of paint on top of it. And that's the goal. We're not looking for beautiful, we're looking for watertight. So all these spots here, all these areas around here, they're all going to get covered with seam sealer. Now we've got to continue welding this way, of course. And we got a little more over here to do. And back in this spot here, well, we got a whole big hole to fill in as well. Now we have our original piece kind of tucked in here. You can see that angled flange I made. It didn't kind of come out how I planned, but I got in there with the MIG, put a bead on each one of those cuts I made, kind of keep it from falling apart, keep it a little more watertight, but again, seam seal is going to rule the day. Alright, so basically, there you have it. That's how you go ahead and take what you have, make yourself a patch panel to fill in those rust spots. Now, start to finish, what would I have done differently? Well, there's a few things. Number one, I probably would have gone out and got some of the correct gauge sheet metal, some brand new stuff I didn't have to clean the paint off of. That way I have some longer sections, have more angles, and this would come out a lot nicer to start with. This isn't shabby, but this is what you can do with what you got laying around. This hat piece, this is hard to make because you got wide flange on the bottom, a little bit of a flange kind of feathers out here a little bit, and it's round. So how do you do that? Well, we tried making flange with an angle on it, and tried an old school method. Didn't work out. Why? I'm not a body guy. But I figured I'd give it a shot. Why? I like low buck options, and it would have been great. So, we cut it, we bent it, not a big deal. Now, there are shrinker stretchers on the market you can buy that would make this piece, make this hat, and you can use those tools also to make angled radiuses for dog legs over your wheel well arches, trunk, wherever you need it. And those are kind of pricey. I started to ask myself, look, what are you going to do? You're going to continue doing piece by piece by piece like this, get bigger pieces? It'd work, but I wanted it a little bit better than that. So I went a different route completely. For the money to buy that tool, because for me, most of my work on the car is done. All the rust repair on the floors, frames, quarter panels, it's all set. I just need to finish the cowl and one section in the rear window. So to buy a $160 tool set that I might not use again didn't make sense for me. So I'm going to show you what I did. I cheated. Hold on. Behold, a rust-free cowl. So this is what I'm going to use to make the repair for mine. I'm going to go ahead and try and get inside filled in with some seal, some rust converter, whatnot. We'll take these pieces off and we'll get the whole cowl replaced. I'm not even going to separate the inner from the outer. I'll drill some holes through this and get it welded up as needed. But that's another video. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video. It got you going on what is possible and how to make these patch panels. You can do it. It takes a little time. You work your way through it. Thanks for watching.